On March 27, 1850, Dr. Thaddeus Hildreth and his brother George made a camp near present-day Columbia. They found gold, and soon several thousand miners flocked to a place called American Camp, which was later renamed Columbia. By the end of 1852, the tents and shanties were replaced by homes and buildings. There were more than 150 stores, shops, saloons, and other enterprises going strong. In 1854, there was a fire that burned through the downtown district, and only one brick building remained. 30 buildings were then rebuilt using locally made brick. The town almost closed down within 1 year because of the lack of a water source. In 1851, the Twain County Water Company was formed to bring water to the area. Their rates were so high that miners ended up building their own aqueduct. This project was not completed until 1858, and by that time the gold deposits had been exhausted and the miners started to move out. Although many people left, Columbia has never been deserted, and in 1945 it became a state park. In its heyday, Columbia yielded $87 million in gold at 1860s prices. And today, tourists, students, and history lovers from all over the world still come to Columbia to see what a real gold rush town looks like. Columbia State Park is located just outside of Sonora, California, in the foothills of Northern California. By visiting Columbia, students get to experience what a real gold rush town looked like. Columbia has a theater, saloons, restaurants, a blacksmith, a museum, a historic bowling lane, a schoolhouse, a cemetery, and countless boutique shops. They have gold panning, stagecoach rides that include a robbery, and a child favorite, an old-time candy shop. The social science standards connected to this visit are Standard 4.3.3, analyze the effects of the gold rush on settlements, daily life, politics, and the physical environment. Also Standard 4.4.7, trace the evolution of California's water system into a network of dams, aqueducts, and reservoirs. One thing that is important for students to know is how the gold rush was very harsh on the environment. Back in the 1850s, there were no rules to protect the environment, and miners blasted miles of bedrock from hydraulic mining all around Columbia, and those effects can still be seen to this day. A great way to integrate this visit into instruction in a social science class environment would be as a web quest. Students can watch videos and read history at their own pace and click on the links that interest them. They can virtually travel from one end of town to the other without leaving their desk. Our next stop is Railtown State Park, located in Jamestown, California. Railtown has a rare collection of Gold Rush-era steam engine trains. The museum offers visitors information about these trains and history of trains in the area. I learned how the motion picture industry chose this area to film westerns in the early to mid-1900s, often using these same trains in what are now considered to be classic movies and television series. Because of this, the Social Studies Standard 4.4.6 applies to my visit to Railtown State Park, which says, describe the development of new industries since the turn of the century, such as the aerospace industry, electronics industry, large-scale commercial agriculture and irrigation projects, the oil and automobile industries, communication and defense industries, and its important links with the Pacific Basin. Some notable films made in the Gold Country: The Virginian, 1929, starring Gary Cooper; Dodge City, 1939, starring Errol Flynn; Young Tom Edison, 1940, starring Mickey Rooney; High Noon, 1952, starring Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly. The series Petticoat Junction was filmed here between 1963 and 1965. Even Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie also shot scenes in the area. The most popular film shot in the 1980s was Back to the Future 3, and the train used to send Michael J. Fox back to the future from 1885 is on display here at Railtown. I have one more social science standard that is related to my trip to Railtown, but we need to take a 15-minute drive to see its relevance. Formerly known as Camp Washington or Washingtonville, a nearby camp called Camp Salvado, miners from El Salvador forced the Chinese miners out and they ended up staying in Camp Washington. So many Chinese moved into Camp Washington, they ended up changing the name to Chinese Camp. Chinese Camp ended up becoming a major transportation hub for the southern goldfields. It had a train station just south of town and was a stop on the stagecoach line. These new Chinese camp miners then had to worry about other rival Chinese miners, while also having to worry about hostile white California miners that wanted them removed from the state. The gold eventually dried up and miners went on their way. At its peak, Chinese camp had over 5,000 miners. Today, only 150 people reside in Chinese camp, and none of the remaining residents today are of Chinese or Asian descent. Some believe the deserted section of Chinese camp is haunted and have experienced paranormal activity when visiting the area. I had no such luck. My visit to Railtown and Chinese camp are relevant to Standard 4.4.1. Understand the story and the lasting influence of the Pony Express, Overland Mail Service, Western Union, and the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, including the contributions of the Chinese workers to its construction. This experience can be used to teach a social-emotional lesson on diversity among gold miners during the gold rush. I would like my students to learn the role of the Chinese during California's history, both during the gold rush and afterwards. The Chinese were exploited and used for slave labor work with low-paying wages. The Chinese should be credited for the construction of the most dangerous parts of the Transcontinental Railroad over the Sierra Nevada mountain range that run near Donner Summit. The small town of Angels Camp was named after a shopkeeper from Rhode Island, Henry Angel, who started a trading post in the area in 1848. The initial name of the settlement was called Carson's Creek, and in 1853 the name changed to Angels Camp. Many of the Gold Rush buildings still stand on Main Street to this day. Angels Camp is best known for the rise of famed American author Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain. Mark Twain wrote his first successful short story based on a tale he heard in an Angels Camp saloon called The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras. The Calaveras Jumping Frog Jubilee has been held continuously since 1928. The Calaveras County Fair is the longest-running county fair in California. The Angels Camp Museum has a large collection of Mark Twain memorabilia, mining equipment from the two types of gold mining found in the area, placer and hard rock mining. And Angels Camp Museum also has the largest carriage and wagon display west of the Mississippi River. It also sits on the famous Angels Quartz Mine historic site. A standard associated with my trip to the Angels Camp Museum is Standard 4.3.2. Compare how and why people traveled to California and the routes they traveled. I would have my students do this using Mark Twain's life as an example. In having my students learn about Mark Twain, they will set up a prior knowledge for American history while they will revisit more about his cross-country travels and his inspiration for writing American classics such as The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. About 25 minutes from the Angel Camp Museum, overlooking New Maloney's Reservoir, is where Mark Twain lived while visiting the Mother Lode. Mark Twain is considered one of the greatest American writers of all time. Born in Missouri in 1835, he found himself on his way to San Francisco in 1864 and eventually traveled to the Angels Camp area, where he lived in this cabin on Jackass Hill. He tried gold prospecting for a short time, then ended up working for the Territorial Enterprise, where he first used the pen name Mark Twain. This concludes our adventure seeking local history in Northern California gold country. Thanks for watching, and remember, We live in a region of the world with history all around us. Don't forget to take it in.